Chapter 5. When Mikkel walked into the hall the next morning, he did not walk into a quiet scene. There were no young children cheerfully getting to know each other. There was screaming as his own princess and another child, whom he would assume was Princess Celine, launched at each other in a brawl. He assumed it was Celine due to the rumors he had heard in which she was said to look exactly like her mother. As a young warrior, he had seen Princess Rosabelle at a tourney before she moved to the Isles. Fists were flying and hair was being pulled, animals were in a tizzy. Mathilde, although smaller than her rival, was not to be undone, and instantly a fight started in the middle of the hall. Shocked, Princess Adeline wrung her hands and tried to talk them into behaving themselves, while the other children tried to drag the two apart. Mikkel had taken one step towards the pair, intending to separate them, when suddenly they flew across the floor away from each other. "Celine, where are your manners?" Nalina demanded, as she stalked down the stairs and into the room. Her hair was loose, and she was wearing a simple gown of blue cloth and a traveling cloak. A bag hung on her arm. "She started it, Alina, saying that Islers are heathens," Celine yelled, scrambling to her feet, her body shaking with compressed rage. Her eyes danced with fire, and the fires of the hearth suddenly became larger and more violent. Mathilde jumped to her own feet and put her hands on her hips, stomping her feet. "My people say that's why Islers always raid the mainland, because they are heathens, not smart enough to grow enough food to support themselves." "At least my people are not barbarians who sleep with animals to keep warm," Celine snarled back. The two girls tried to run at each other again, but with a clap of Nalina's hands they were suspended in the air, squealing and kicking. "Now, Celine, you must learn to separate your emotions from your powers when others say rude things to you." Celine took in a large gulp of air, struggling to contain her rage, which had the fires nearly licking at the ceiling. Warily, soldiers inched away from the fires. "Princess Mathilde, we have yet to meet. I am Lady Nalina, your guardian for the next several years while you learn all you can from me, magical and otherwise. I do not approve of fisticuffs between my charges, nor is it polite to group all people under one large banner. You will be wise to know all people for the individuals that they are. You will be less surprised in life by doing such." With a wave of her hand, Nalina lowered both girls to the ground. The fires were banked once again. "I have to leave for a few days, so until I get back I expect you to be on your best behavior. And when I return, I expect a full oral report on the animals of my household, the village, and the surrounding forests. If you go beyond my walls, you must take 2 soldiers with you." Nalina's voice softened when Mathilde looked properly chastised, and she sat down for a spot of breakfast. As she daintily nibbled on some toast, Nalina continued to assign work. "Celine, I want you to work more on your exercises to control your temper, and I would like to see you use fire to help the blacksmith create weaponry for you and the others to use in weapons training. Mikkel, can you and several other men be ready to ride after we eat?" It took Mikkel a second to realize she was talking to him, for he marveled at the fact that Mathilde was already eager in walking away from a rival instead of continuing to fight them. He nodded and walked away from the group to select a few of his choice riders. Celine sat by Nalina. "But, Nalina, what if I lose control?" she asked, fear dancing on the edge of her eyes. "Darling, just wear your pendant until I am back. It will help you keep control," Nalina crooned to the frantic young girl, and she nodded quietly before rushing away to find it. "Aubrey," Nalina spoke to the eldest of the girls, "and Adeline, I want the cupboards fully stocked with remedies for the entire manor house when I return." She turned to the one boy. "Niall, I want a fully chartered star chart, and I want you to just behave yourself. Nothing else. Just behave yourself and stop bothering the girls." "Adeline, you were also to work on your physical skills." "What?" "Adeline, you are to also work on your physical skills." He looked extremely downtrodden that he was expected to behave himself. As an afterthought, Nalina added, "Adeline, you are to also work on your physical skills." Oh. Mikkel watched in shock as each of the children gave her a hug before they hurried away to their chores. Nelina finished her toast and stood up, fastening her cloak and walking out of the hall. In the courtyard, several men were already mounted and waiting. Nelina was one of her trusty steeds held by a stable boy. She was boosted into her side seat, her bag fastened behind her as she nodded to Mikkel, and then cantered out of the yard, followed by the others. Mathilde watched them go from the yard. 10 years old, she was the youngest of the children to be gathered so far. She was the crown princess of her kingdom, the only direct descendant. The royal family of the Heartlands kingdom were nomadic. They traveled throughout their kingdom overseeing their people. "We were not properly introduced," started a polite, cheerful voice from behind Mathilde. She turned to see Adeline with the others. "As I was saying, this is Princess Celine from the Isles. She prefers to be known as just Celine. Then this is Aubrey and Niall. Do you need any help being shown around?" "No, thanks. I think I'll start off at the stables." Mathilde spoke politely, reluctant to be involved in the group. She turned and walked down the steps and across the courtyard. The group observed her, with Niall pointing out dryly, "Not much of a people person, is she?" "Give her time, Niall. She'll come around," Adeline said as they all watched her walk away. "Oh, joy!" Celine's sarcastic tone sent them to laugh. Nelina and the men-at-arms rode quickly to the nearest harbor, the harbor city of the Heartlands, a day and a half's ride east. From there they took a ship over the Salt River to land in the kingdom of Drela. Ships left once a day to travel back and forth between the Heartlands and the southern kingdoms, as the kingdoms were at peace with each other. Nelina did not talk but rode hard, pressed by a vision that she was determined to alter. Once they landed in Drela, she led them inland southwest. It only took a few hours for them to reach a small village, with orchards bearing many fruits. But no villagers picked the fruit or cut the crops. The village looked to be deserted, no women performing daily chores, no playing children, and no men out to fish in the nearby streams. They rode undetected almost through the village, hearing shouts as they rode onwards. Once they reached nearly the heart of the village, then they came upon the people. The scent of fear was on the air, along with the smell of fire. The villagers were gathered around a pyre that was about to burn a family alive. The men-at-arms used their horses to part the crowd before the large grey warhorse that bore Nelina on its back. Her hands rested on its proud neck in front of her, while her eyes were rested upon the family committed to burning. The crowd grew silent. Although the wood was dry and the weather warm in the dying sun, the flames were struggling to touch the family bound to the center of the pyre. Tears streamed across the face of a dirty girl hanging between her parents as she tried to push the flames away from her family. Suddenly, tear-filled gray eyes snapped away from the flames to stare into black ones. Those gray eyes were filled with pleading. Nelina her hands and clapped them twice. The flames extinguished. A flash of those black eyes made the ropes vanish, and the man and woman fell to their knees while the girl gently landed on her feet. She padded barefoot across the cold planks of the pyre to the edge in front of the horse. No words were spoken. "How dare you!" The village headman finally gained the power of his tongue, and pushed to the front of the crowd. He stepped between the horse and the pyre and slapped the little girl, and angrily he turned and slapped the little girl, sending her flying back beside her still gasping parents. "This little witch is to be sacrificed to the goddess of the harvest, along with her traitorous parents, to bless our crops with rain." Nelina's eyes were once again hard, and a single eyebrow arched at his words. She held her gaze even when he looked away, shifting with nervousness. There was a long silent pause before she finally spoke. "And why did the goddess need this sacrifice?" He swallowed with nerves before stammering, words coming out in a rush. Uh, um, mm, uh, to keep the gods happy with us, so our crops will be fruitful and our village will continue to thrive from the death of them and our sacrifice of the blacksmith, our baker, and the little witch." Nelina slowly began to nod, and she smiled at him. "So, to be in complete understanding, a sacrifice will please the gods and make your village more fruitful." The headman nodded back at her, pleased. She understood. The family flinched slightly as the look that entered her eyes as she became even straighter and remarked calmly, "Well, we don't want to disappoint the goddess." She turned her head as she looked over the village, and the many crops, including the orchard trees and their fruit. A flash in her eyes, and it was all on fire. Flames hungrily gobbled the fruit from the trees and spread like wildfire, chasing the villages with hunger as they fled. I hope the gods will be satisfied now, for a sacrifice coming from oneself is far more pleasing than making others sacrifice for you. The headman could not respond, for his wife grabbed him and fled. Nelina was completely unconcerned that flames were roaring around her as she looked at the family still huddled in the middle of the pyre. I am Lady Nelina. I have charges from several kingdoms, young girls and a young boy who share your powers in sorcery. I have been pledged to teach them not only how to control their powers, but how to thrive and help the world. I would like you to join me, little Elbin. You and your parents are welcome to join us. My blacksmith is elderly and overwhelmed by all the soldiers my charges bring with them, and assistance in the kitchen is always appreciated. The family had come to perch at the edge of the pyre as Nelina spoke, and the wife began to weep tears of joy at her words, one arm shielding her pregnant belly while the other was around her daughter. How did you know my name? Demanded the little girl. Nelina smiled softly. My little Cirrus is a powerful child. She and the others wait to welcome you into my household. Evelyn shuffled her feet together, looking down in shame. But I'm no high-born lady like them. Nelina laughed as her horse stepped closer, swinging his rump against the pyre so his rider could lean forward and lift the little girl to sit before her. Neither are several of my charges. I shall tell you of them while we ride. Get horses for the parents. She turned to Mikkel. Get horses for the parents. She encouraged her horse onwards as her men helped the parents. Then, with a bare touch of her heels, Nelina's gray horse cantered off through the orchard. Undeterred by the flames, her men following, leaving destruction and chaos in their wake. And Nelina didn't even care that she left villagers trying to put out the blaze. Her eyes glinted not with humanity, but with the steel outrage of gods blessed. The divine were not known for their mercy. As they traveled through the lands unchecked, Evelyn and her parents were greatly surprised by the generosity and kindness of their travel companions. They had very rarely dealt with nobility, and when they had, the nobility had all been disgustingly rude and haughty and hefty. However, Nelina was as down to earth as she could be. She claimed she had been raised in a village just like Evelyn many years ago, and was no true-born lady, just a clever girl like Evelyn would be. Nelina filled their travel with tales of the young sorcerer and sorceresses that Evelyn was about to meet, for she knew that Adeline would already have regaled the little group of Evelyn. Evelyn became more and more intrigued and even terrified of this young group, for she truly had nothing in common with them. Her parents loved her, but were a blacksmith and a baker, not royalty like the people she was about to meet. Her birth mother had died and labored her, but her stepmother treated her like her own. Evelyn wondered what sort of welcome she would receive. On the afternoon that they rode into the courtyard of the manor house, the children were already gathered at the foot of the steps of the house. Nelina dismounted off her grey, then lifted Evelyn to the ground. The children all proceeded down in front of her. Hello, Evelyn. I'm Aubrey, and this is Celine, Aubrey said, indicating the girl with the black eye and dirty face. The beautiful girl, dressed in a stunning little gown, hugged Evelyn tight around the shoulders, startling the little girl, who was still in a dress singed at the edges. I'm Adeline, she whispered before pulling back. Evelyn just smiled nervously at her. Now, now, children, we do not want to overwhelm our newest additions. Go wash up for dinner while I show Evelyn and her parents where they will be living. Nelina turned to the three newcomers. Although, as I said before, Evelyn, you will have a room in the manor house for late-night studies. With a soft smile, she beckoned through the hall and into the kitchens. Ah! Ah, my lady, back already are you, and with another little troublemaker in your wake? The surly cook sully demanded, as he chopped food and eyeballed Evelyn, who shrank beside her mother and father. Nelina looked intrigued. Dare I ask which of these children got you upset? The little princess that seems to think that she can save all the mice so they can climb into my stores at night needs a talking to, my lady. I won't be allowing rodents sneaking into my kitchen at night, I won't. He snarled as he slammed his knife harder into the cutting board, sending potatoes flying. Evelyn's parents could not believe that the cook could speak to his lady in such a manner, but Nelina only laughed, charmed. Of course, Sully. I'll be sure to speak to Mathilde about keeping the animals out of the kitchen. Now, the reason we came to you before we changed from our travels is this is going to be our village's new baker. This is Jean and her husband Bill. Their daughter Evelyn is going to join the other children in their studies. Sully nodded at the parents. Welcome. I'm busy, but we can chat later after the kitchen girls and I get supper on the table, once they move it. He bellowed over his shoulder at the three gossipy girls who jumped and then ran giggling to their spots. We won't keep you then, Nalina said, ushering the family to the dining room. The family could barely keep up with their speech, for they were stunned by her hall, which was warm and welcoming. Then Nalina took them to the new cottage. It was charming, larger than their old one, and located close to the main gate to the manor house. It was far more than they thought they would ever get, and for that Nalina had from that moment on their everlasting loyalty. While they had been gone, the five other children had not really been bonding. Or rather, Mathilde had not bonded with the others. The Heartlanders are vastly different people, very cheerful amongst themselves, but they did not really get along well with others. Nalina had expected as much, so when they were all well groomed and sitting together at dinner, she observed all the children closely. So, what did you children do while I was away? The children all looked at each other and shrugged. Well, Celine and I helped each other out. She helped me with my physical exercises, and then Aubrey helped us with control while we passed a fireball back and forth. And then after Niall finished his star chart, we all made jewelry together, using our powers to heat metals, Adeline said, and exchanged big smiles with the other four. Good, good. Now what about you, Mathilde? Nalina asked, took a drink of wine, and as she turned to the youngest princess, who was not even looking up because, as Nalina discovered, one of the manor cats was stretched out on her lap. Mathilde glanced up and blinked in surprise. What? The lady's maid groaned in disbelief. Princesses do not say what, Mathilde, they say pardon. Mathilde rolled her eyes and then mimicked her in a taunting tone. Beg your pardon, Lady Nalina, but pardon? Nalina repeated her question, and Mathilde shrugged. I introduced myself to the animals. A few of the soldiers' horses needed some care. Not that that was surprising at all. Ulcers and such. She remarked dryly as she pushed around food on her plate. She looked completely unimpressed at being in the company of other humans. Nalina studied Mathilde over her glass. How much interaction with the other humans have you had since I was gone? She was unsurprised to see a shrug as her answer. A small chuckle threatened to erupt from Nalina's chest, and she sipped her wine to cover it, though she exchanged a humorous glance with Mikkel. Well, that is going to stop, Nalina said, and then turned to look at Celine. And you, my dear, how did your exercises go? Celine was sporting more bruises than before, not that it was surprising, and she was beaming from ear to ear. Really good! I made a matching necklace, earrings, and bracelet, without lighting anything on fire, she told her with a great deal of pride. Nalina patted her hand with a big smile. Good for you, darling. I'm incredibly pleased with all of you over this last week. Now tomorrow in the morning we will start our classes. They all brightened up. Unlike most children when told they had to do classes.